You know, when you hear the name Bentley, you immediately think of ultimate luxury, right? Handcrafted, high performance, a car for the super rich, really a symbol of making it. But, behind all that polished wood and perfect leather, there's a hidden story. A story of tragedy, of betrayal, and a founder who ended up losing everything.
I mean, just look at the contrast. On one hand, you've got Bentley today, record-breaking sales, this incredible global prestige, an absolute icon of wealth. And then on the other hand, you have the guy who started it all, Walter Owen Bentley. He was cast aside, totally betrayed, and even forced to work for his biggest rival. It's just a shocking difference. So that's the big question we're going to dig into. How did a guy who absolutely dominated the racetrack, a man who set out to build, in his own words, a fast car, a good car, the best in its class, how did he end up being completely written out of his own story? To really get the fall, you have to go back to the beginning. And Walter Owen, or W.O. as everyone called him, had a super unlikely start. He wasn't some car nut from day one. Nope. His first real passion was trains. And what's wild is what he first thought of cars. He couldn't stand them. He literally called them disgraceful vehicles. Just noisy, messy things that splashed mud everywhere. Kind of funny, coming from the man who would build one of the most famous car brands in history, right? So Woe started out as a railway apprentice. He was obsessed with the mechanics, how things worked. But the world of trains, it just wasn't fast enough for him. What really hooked him was the pure thrill of early motorcycle racing. That's where an engineer could really prove their mettle, pushing engines to their absolute limit. That's the challenge that pulled him into the world of motors. And his genius really came through during World War I with this one revolutionary idea. See, back then, engine pistons were made of heavy steel or cast iron. W.O. had a thought. What if we used a lightweight aluminum alloy instead? Specifically, a mix of 88% aluminum and 12% copper. The result? Engines that were way more powerful, more reliable, and a whole lot faster. This one idea, first used in British fighter planes, became the foundation for everything he'd do later. It was all about using lighter, smarter materials, not just brute force. So after the war, he took the money he earned from that invention and finally founded Bentley Motors in 1919. And his mission statement, it was crystal clear right from the get-go. No compromises. He wasn't just going to make a car. He was going to make the car, the best. And that ambition led pretty quickly to the company's golden age. See, Bentley's reputation wasn't just built in some workshop. It was forged in the heat of competition, on the racetrack, thanks to this legendary group of wealthy, daredevil drivers who became known as the Bentley Boys. And their performance was just staggering. They didn't just show up at Le Mans, the toughest endurance race in the world. They owned it. 4 straight wins from 1927 to 1930. This is what cemented the Bentley name. It wasn't just a luxury car. It was a tough, reliable, and incredibly fast machine. But here's where the story takes that tragic turn. W.O. Bentley's relentless quest for perfection, his single greatest engineering masterpiece, would ironically be the very thing that brought his company to its knees. He poured every ounce of his genius into this one car, the Bentley 8-liter. It was an absolute marvel. It was massive, incredibly powerful, but also whisper quiet. And get this, it was one of the first production cars that could actually go over 100 miles per hour, guaranteed. This was his vision made real. It was also a complete and total financial disaster. The timing couldn't have been worse. I mean, it was just catastrophic. The Wall Street crash of 29 hits, plunging the entire world in the Great Depression. And what does Bentley do a year later? They released their most expensive, most over-the-top luxury car ever. The market for a car like that just evaporated. By 1931, the company was bankrupt. But going bankrupt wasn't even the worst of it. The real gut punch, the final blow, came when the company was sold. It was all done in secret, and it was the ultimate betrayal. So the company's in receivership, and it goes up for auction. A mysterious, anonymous bidder comes out of nowhere and wins. Everyone was left scratching their heads, wondering who on earth had just bought this legendary brand. Well, the truth was way more shocking than anyone could have guessed. The secret buyer wasn't some fan or a savvy investor. It was the competition, Rolls-Royce. Can you believe it?
Bentley's biggest competitor had secretly bought them out, and not to save the brand, but to get rid of a threat. For W.O. Bentley, this had to be the most devastating, humiliating moment of his life.
And the personal cost for him was just immense. His life completely unraveled. He was forced to stay on and work for Rolls-Royce, but he was basically a glorified test driver with zero real power. He had to just sit there and watch his brand, his baby, get watered down. On top of that, he went through a divorce. They even took away his personal 8-liter car. He died in 1971 with no children to carry on his name. Just tragic. And this kicked off a long, dark period for the Bentley brand. For decades, a Bentley wasn't really a Bentley anymore. It was just a name, a badge on a car that had lost the very soul its founder gave it. Under Rolls-Royce, the brand's unique identity just faded away. Bentleys became little more than rebadged Rolls-Royces, sharing the same bodies, the same engines. Production just tanked. At one point, Bentleys made up a tiny 5% of the company's total output. The racing DNA that W.O. had poured his life into, it was gone. But okay, the story doesn't end in that sad place. After decades lost in the wilderness, a couple of changes in ownership finally set the stage for one of the greatest comebacks in automotive history. The revival started to simmer under a company called Vickers in the 80s, but the real explosion happened when the Volkswagen Group bought them in 1998. VW didn't just throw money at the problem. They invested in the brand's soul. They got it. They understood that Bentley was about performance first, then luxury. So they did the one thing that could prove it. They took Bentley back to Le Mans. And in 2003, 73 years after the last victory of the Bentley Boys, a Bentley was on top of the podium again.
And that victory on the track led to a massive win in the showroom. The launch of the Continental GT was a phenomenon. It was the perfect mix of W.O.'s original vision, performance and luxury. To put it in perspective, sales shot up from around 800 cars a year to over 7,000. The brand was back, and honestly, more successful than W.O. could have ever dreamed of.
So that leaves us with one last thing to think about. There's no question that Bentley, the company, is a massive success today. It's powerful, it's luxurious, it's dominant. But in finding all this modern glory, did it manage to get back that passionate, uncompromising, and ultimately tragic soul of the man who risked absolutely everything to create it in the first place? It's a tough one to answer.